Hey guys, I hope all is well. I have another off-meta build here for you today. I haven't seen a single person playing this build because everyone and their mother is chasing after the quadrillion damage quill volley builds, which really reminds me of Spectral Throw from Path of Exile. But anyways, I'm not about chasing what's popular, and I kind of like finding my own way to play and figure things out, which is what I did with this build, and it was quite the struggle to figure things out, but it was pretty fun. I started using Thrash and Rake because I thought they were cool and interesting, but it ended up being too much to invest into both basic and a core skill. So I ended up sticking to Rake and seeing how much I could pump it up. And boy, was I able to pump it up because the damage that I was generating reached up to 1.4 billion damage, and I was able to face tank and dodge almost all forms of damage, which I never thought possible for one of my builds. But needless to say, it took down all the tormented bosses and took a donkey doodoo all over Uber Lilith, all on Torment 4 difficulty, of course. But before I jump into the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think of the build because any feedback is always appreciated. So the way I play this build is I pop all my buffs and attack. Pretty simple, right? My counterattack grants me damage immunity to almost everything except for very specific attacks like Andariel's moving firewall, Zir's blood pools, and Lilith's various waves and slams. But everything else is fair game because I have 100% chance to dodge attacks and abilities. Ravager causes my Rake to jump to my target, which eliminates the need for excessive investments into mobility, not to mention it's also a damage buff. Scourge grants me stacks up to 50, which is basically a 50 times damage multiplier. The Hunter, which is my ultimate, is a massive boost to DPS, and Armored Hide gives me 100% chance to block damage, which basically reduces damage intake, but it's also a damage boost due to my redirecting force aspect. And lastly, I have various buffs to Rake, like Wild Claws, which makes Rake cast twice, and my weapon, which gives me a chance for Rake to cast again, which if it does, it'll do a second Rake again due to Wild Claws, leading up to a chance for 4 Rake casts from one single attack. And with all my buffs, I have about 150% increased attack speed, which is about 2.75 attacks per second, which is potentially 11 rakes per second if I get lucky. Lastly, due to Prodigy's tempo and the sheer number of rakes being cast per second, my entire ability bar has virtually 0-second cooldown, so all my buffs have permanent uptime. So yeah, that's about it. Pretty simple and easy to pull off. Nothing crazy, nothing too expensive, very doable, not too much investment in terms of hours and life essence. Alrighty, so let's move into gear. For my Helm, I'm running the new Season 6 unique Harmony of Ebewaka because of the insane damage multiplier I get for using multiple spirit types. Also, it allows me permanent access to 3 spirit types since Rake is a Jaguar spirit. My first spirit hall choice becomes a second spirit type for Rake, and this helm allows my second spirit hall choice to become a third spirit type for Rake. So basically my Rake is now 3 spirit types all the time, and because of that I get an 84% times damage multiplier, which is insane. For my chest, I've got life, armor, res, chance to stun, and +6 max resolve with the duelist aspect for +4 max ferocity. For my gloves, I've got wild claws aspect to cause a second rake cast, and it's got attack speed, crit damage, +4 to rake, and chance to stun and plus basic damage. For my legs, I've got protection of the prime for the insane amounts of damage after dodging, which as you know I have 100% chance to dodge, which is up 100% of the time. It also gives a very nice boost to damage reduction, but that's only relevant while I'm standing still. For my boots, I'm running apprehension aspect for a damage boost, and it's got life, armor, +4 to ravager, which isn't necessary, it's just what I had, and chance to freeze with extra movement speed. For my amulet, I'm running moonrise for the crazy damage boost and attack speed, and it's got percent armor and +3 to dominant and potent, which is insane for damage. And it's got Armored Hide Resolve Generation, which I actually didn't want, but I was stuck with it, and it's got plus to basic damage. For my first ring, I've got Redirected Force, which is really good for damage after casting Armored Hide, bringing my block chance to 100%, thus giving me 66% times multiplier on my crit damage, doubled to 132% if I block a hit. Other than that, it's got life, damage, crit damage, counterattack charges for quality of life, and basic damage. For my second ring, I'm running Ring of Starless Skies because I got it as a drop, insanely enough. But even if I didn't, I'd probably just craft it with the free Respondent Sparks you get by playing the game. The ring gives a massive damage boost and attack speed, which is lovely, and it's an all-around amazing ring on almost any build. Lastly, for my weapon, I'm running the famous Rod of Kepeleki, or Kapeleki, I have no idea how to say this name. This is a build enabling unique, which makes my Rake also count as a basic skill, which explains why I have so much investment into basic skill damage. Also, it gives me an insane damage boost, maximizes the size of my Rake to hit half the screen, and gives a chance for my Rake to hit twice. Lastly, for my runes, I'm running Tam with Mott, which grants me Dark Shrouds from the Rogue whenever I cast a Rake 6 times, which gives me some lovely damage reduction. Then I've got Yuck with Cry, which casts the Eagle skill Vortex when I cast a cooldown skill 6 times, which is literally all my buffs and the majority of my ability bar. And Vortex pulls in enemies for a faster clear, which is nice for quality of life. Honestly, you can play with whatever runes you want. These are just the ones that I decided to stick with because I thought it would help the build the most in the moment. I know a lot of people go the Druid Shield one, the Earthen Bulwark, and they synergize that with something on the Paragon board, the Vicious Shield, but I decided not to do that for now because I decided to play around with my own combinations just so I can see what works and what I like. Alrighty, so for my skill tree, I just put 1 point into Thrash and then just get 1 point here just so I can access this, and then you max out Rake and then you go into Rampant Rake to reduce the vigor cost per stack of ferocity. I'm not too sure which is better at this point, this or Advantageous Rake, because this also reduces cooldowns, but it's kind of unnecessary because I already have a cooldown reducing mechanism, so I'm not too sure, honestly. You could just play around with this. And then I get 1 point into Vigorous just so I can get 3 points into Ballast Exertion, which is really good for damage. And then since our Rake is also a basic skill due to our Rod, this is also really good for damage as well. And then I come here for Mirage into Unrestrained Power because while we're unstoppable, we gain times 12% damage, and we are pretty much unstoppable all the time because whenever we activate Armored Hide, we become unstoppable. And as I mentioned before, I pretty much have 100% uptime on all my buffs. So this is just a really good boost in damage. Then I get Ravager into Measured Ravager so that my Rake can regenerate lots of vigor and also dash to whatever I hit, which is really nice. Then I get Endurance into 2 points into Perseverance for more damage reduction. Armored Hide is really good for damage block, for block chance. And then Reinforced Armored Hide also gives me more damage reduction. And then I also get Counterattack into Reinforced Counterattack, which is nice for damage. I get Scourge into Reinforced Scourge because it gives me more Vigor generation, which is really good for my weapon damage. I get 3 points into Resilience for the extra life, and then 3 points into Dominant for the damage, especially since our Rake is a Gorilla skill, and then 3 points into Potent and Furnace, all for damage. 3 points into Ravenous and Oppressive, also for damage because our Rake is also a Centipede skill. And then we got Resolution for damage, Spiritual Attunement for extra vigor for our rod damage, and then Supremacy, which is more damage, and then Sustenance, which really just helps me survive more. I just recover life every time I cast my ult, which is every like 5 seconds, which is really nice. And then obviously you get the Hunter, which is a really good ulti skill, especially because it gives me +4 extra maximum ferocity, which is really nice. And we do 100% increased damage to injured enemies. So when they get down to the low life, pretty much they die really quickly. And then lastly, we got Prodigy's Tempo, which I've mentioned before, is the bread and butter of making all of my abilities have virtually 0 cooldown, especially since our attack speed is so high and we're casting so many rakes. We're just decreasing all of our cooldowns, as you saw in the clips before. And then for my Paragon board, it's really not even maxed out. Honestly, you don't even need to get to 221, but I think this is a very comfortable amount, especially considering I just have enough stats, but if you can manage to get more stats without investing too much into the Paragon board, then you're really well off. Honestly, probably around like 200 to 210 is all you need. For my first board, I have Colossal for the times damage per resolve stack. So I think I have about 16, so this is times 32% increased damage. I know there's a lot of resolve stacking builds out there, and this is just a really good mechanic for building damage. And since Rake is a gorilla skill, I also benefit from that as well. And then I come up here into my second board, which is Sapping, which every 3 times I cast a Rake, I'm getting back a lot of vigor and doing 30% increased damage, which is insane. And then over here, I get Menagerist, which because of my Helm and my Spirit Hall choices, my Rake is always a Jaguar, Gorilla, and Centipede skill, and occasionally, because of my runes, I will cast Vortex, which is an Eagle skill, so I get the full benefit from this glyph, which gives me 4% increased damage per spirit. So I have all 4, so that's 16 times increased damage, which is absolutely amazing. Not to mention, this heavily boosts my magic notes here, so I get plus 10 max resource, plus 10 max resource, up to 30, and then of course this as well. And then each of these is over 20% damage. And then I get a bunch of int from these as well. Then I come up here for revealing for the 30% times increased damage to crowd controlled enemies, which is really nice. And over here I put fester for the 15% increased damage to crowd control enemies with my centipede skills, which, as I mentioned, my Rake is a centipede skill, so I also get the benefits from the damage boost from here as well. And then down here on my 4th board, I come and I get Infighter, which gives me attack speed and damage every time I dodge or block up to 9 times. And then lastly, I come and socket fitness for that percent increased crit damage multiplier and that flat crit damage boost as well. And also, whenever I crit, I generate some vigor, which is just a small little cherry on top. Alrighty, and for my Spirit Hall choices, I have Gorilla as my first Spirit Hall for that extra barrier and max life. And then this one is very irrelevant for the effect. I just get it so that my Rake can also count as a centipede skill. I could switch it back around, but then I would lose out on that max life. If I did swap it around, then I would have extra damage reduction because whatever I hit will do less damage to me, and I'll also gain +2 max resolve, which only gives me 4% times increased damage, which isn't crazy by any means, and I don't need this unstoppable, so I thought it would be better if I just kept it as Gorilla first so that I can get the extra defenses in case I miss the timing on my counterattack, or if I'm just getting hit by something that I can't dodge or avoid the damage, then it's definitely helpful to have a larger health pool. And as for my Mercenaries, I have Altkin because he gives me 15% increased damage to enemies wherever he casts this Languish, which is just an area line on the ground, which he ever so occasionally casts. And then for my reinforcements, I have Varanya, who just gives me extra attack speed, which is really nice. Alrighty, so there you have it, my first ever 1 billion damage character. I'm pretty happy with how far it's come, and I can't wait to make more Spiritborn characters, especially with all the basic skills. I just wish I had more time in the world. Other than that, here is the Uber Lilith kill. Blizzard did make the boss fight a little easier because the second ad spawn in the first phase doesn't spawn eggs, which is really nice, but it's still the hardest boss in the game nonetheless. I hope you guys enjoy the fight, and I'll see you guys next time.